Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research, and their experiences. So, put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hello and welcome to the Sociology Show podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Collins, high quality student books, teacher guides and unbeatable value revision for GCSE and A-level sociology. If you'd like to see what Collins have got on offer, then please do visit collins.co.uk and search for sociology. The Sociology Show podcast is also brought to you in association with Tutor to You Sociology, the exam performance specialist for A-level and GCSE sociology students and teachers. And you can visit their website, which is tutortoyou.net/sociology, and there you can pick up revision guides, flashcards, revision videos, and everything else that you need for your A-level or GCSE sociology studies. And so my guest for this episode is Catherine Owen. Catherine, thank you very much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Catherine. I always ask people to start by saying a little bit about who you are and what you do, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, I hate to break it to you, but I'm actually a geography teacher, and I trained in geography, and I taught geography for many years, and we came to a situation where in my school, which is an 11 to 18 comprehensive school down in Somerset, and so we had a situation where we had our sociology teacher leaving and the school was in a redundancy situation. So people were worried about taking on a new teacher, and we only have A-level sociology in my school. And so there were, some questions asked about, was there anyone that could pick up some sociology? So I was a little bit nervous about this. I did sociology as a subsidiary subject when I was at university, down at the University of Plymouth. So I had done a little bit of it. And I also have 2 master's degrees in education. And I knew that there was a big education topic as part of the A-level sociology. So I popped along to the head's office and said, I love teaching sixth form. I was very experienced in teaching A-level geography. And so I said, maybe I could help out with the sociology. So next thing I knew, I was head of sociology and teaching the sociology content along with a colleague. And that is quite a long time ago now. I mean, that's probably over 10 years ago now. And I have totally fallen in love with teaching A-level sociology. It is a wonderful subject.
That's fantastic. Can I ask how long you've been in the sociology game now then?
I was just thinking, I don't actually know. I've been teaching since 1994, and so I've been teaching a very long time, and I must have been teaching sociology, like I say, for over 10 years, but I'm not sure exactly how long. I'd have to work it out sometime.
That's good. And it's good to hear that you fall in love with the subject. And actually, what we were going to discuss today is just the crossover, actually, wasn't it? How they kind of complement each other as subjects.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. When it comes to geography, a lot of people tend to assume that when I say that the subjects of geography and sociology have a lot of crossover, people always assume that I mean the human geography. But whilst there are a lot of crossovers between human geography and sociology, some people might be surprised to hear how important sociology is also in physical geography. So if I start off with a bit of human geography, in human geography, we look particularly at A-level at global systems and governance. So we look at how things are organised on a global scale, do a big study of Antarctica and the idea of being a global commons. We have studies of different places. So you study a distant place and a familiar place. And there's also lessons that involve things like you can choose between topics of urbanisation, population, resource management. Now, the thing is with those topics, there is so much sociology. When we look at the changing places topic, The students are looking at how places are represented. They look at things like representation in the media, in tourist brochures, through things like poetry. They look at how these places develop a sense of identity. And so this whole idea of identity and representation is really strong in human geography. Now, of course, in sociology, these are fundamental concepts in sociology. So I think that any student who has got a grounding in sociology and understands about things like identity and representation, they are going to find the geography just comes very naturally to them. And what's beautiful about it is that you're looking at very specific places. So, for example, in my school, the students look at their local town of Highbridge, and they also look at some areas of Bristol. And so they're applying the learning that they have more generally in sociology to very specific examples, which I think is just a really amazing symbiosis, the two subjects working together. So that's really good. We also have as well, when we're looking at human geography, a massive amount of looking at inequalities. And of course, inequalities are something we explore a great deal in sociology. So again, we've got the sociology providing such an important foundation for understanding inequalities, and then students in geography applying that understanding to specific locations, maybe within this country or maybe around the world. So I think a lot of people would probably connect human geography and sociology and say, yes, you know, those are interlinked. But what people might not realise is how important sociology is in physical geography. And I actually first came across this idea before I started teaching sociology. I went to the Geographical Association conference. I'm very involved with the Geographical Association. I was at the conference and I was listening to a wonderful speaker, a guy called Professor Ian Stewart, who is a geologist. You may have seen him on television. He's done different shows like Volcano Live. And he is Scottish. So he did hires, and he did geology as a hire, and he also did sociology. And he talked really passionately at the conference about how geologists need to understand sociology, because if you are saying to a community, this volcano is likely to erupt, we need you to move and we need you to go away from this area, leave your homes behind, then sometimes you don't have geologists communicating that very well. And the thing is that you have to really understand the community to think about how to get them to understand what's happening with the volcano and why they need to move away. And you need to have that sociological perspective to be able to get the balance of the fact that you can't just say to somebody you're moving away and they just do it. They need to weigh up what's basically tying them to the area. So they may have farms. If they're going to go and stay away for a couple of weeks, what's going to happen to their crops? What's going to happen to their animals? It's a lot of different things that will be going through people's minds. So what Professor Ian Stewart was saying is we need to understand sociology because we need to understand people, not just volcanoes. And we need science communicators. So this was an idea that I was fascinated by because obviously I'd done a bit of sociology as part of my degree. So I was interested in this, and this is a theme that I've seen growing more and more important in physical geography, and particularly in hazards geography, is the idea of science communication and having people that will understand what's going on with the physical geography and be able to communicate that in a way that other groups of people will understand. And I was really excited when we got the new geography specification through in the new exams in 2015, because the section now on hazards has lots and lots in it about things like why do people perceive hazards differently and how that might be connected to levels of wealth, levels of education, family situations, religious beliefs, cultural expectations. So I was really excited to see that it was recognising the importance of sociology. So it's just brilliant teaching both the A levels because I just think they interact so well.
Because as soon as you were saying that, I was just thinking about the different sort of reactions to the pandemic. And there's been questions about who's getting vaccinated, who's not, which levels are high, which are low. And that, you know, that kind of connects to ethnicity and culture, religion. There's so many factors that kind of connect those things together, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in my sociology lessons, I've been finding that we have quite a lot of opportunities to talk about the impacts of the pandemic. And I think it's important now to do that. At the time, when things were really difficult in lockdowns, then wasn't the time.
Yeah.
Because too many people were losing too much. And also when we were teaching remotely, I didn't feel that was an appropriate thing to talk about something that could be really triggering for a child when I wasn't there with them. But now I found particularly, I teach the OCR A-level geography course, and there's a section on global digital communication. And so that we've talked about a lot in relation to the pandemic. And I'm now teaching my year 13s about education. And we've just been looking at how social class can be related to educational attainment, and thinking about the impacts of the lockdowns and of the pandemic on students in different contexts, and how inequalities were in many ways exacerbated. I think the students have found it, obviously interesting from a sociological perspective, but also I teach in a 11 to 18 school in a very, very normal town. We have students from all different types of backgrounds, and it was actually quite therapeutic, I think, for many of them to be able to talk about the experiences, about the stress that they were feeling when they were expected to be doing schoolwork on their computer, but maybe sharing a computer between several children in the family, and and how difficult it was for them when maybe their parent or parents were not able to work, and the whole, everybody being in the house together all the time. Some of them were much younger siblings. So I just think that sociology at the moment, it's very interesting reflecting on the impact of the pandemic, which of course is still ongoing, but also giving students that chance to, to be able to voice experiences they've had and discuss those in the sociological context.
Yeah. Because that reaction to, that's really interesting about the reaction to hazards and so on as well. I read recently about the naming of hurricanes, that if it's a male name, people are more likely to move away. That if it's called Hurricane Sarah, people think that it's going to be a bit milder and won't damage them, and they don't move on. So I thought that was a really interesting study. That
I haven't heard that. I'll look that up. That sounds really interesting.
I can't remember which book I read it in, but naming. The feminization of a hurricane, people think they're less at risk, and they think it's more scary or dangerous if it's a male name.
That is fascinating. I'll look that up. That's absolutely fascinating.
I'll try and work out where I read it. And I was also thinking, as you mentioned, Ian Stewart's idea that, geographers need to know sociology, whether you could invert the argument, actually, that sociologists need to understand geography.
It definitely helps. I have a lot of confidence about teaching about globalization. I have got a lot of experience. I have got a link with Uganda, and I go to Uganda and I work with a group of schools over there on continuing professional development with my colleague Sebastian. And so when it comes to teaching education topics, in the A-level I teach, you need to look at global disparities in education, and I think that my geographical background makes me really strong in anything to do with globalization and thinking about those educational disparities. It's so real to me. When I'm talking about the experiences of students in schools in different parts of the world, I can picture those schools that I've been in Uganda, and I can talk from the heart to my classes about my experiences. And one of the things that I found has been wonderful about the sociology community is there are a lot of people that share a great deal. And during the first lockdown, there were some fantastic sociologists who got together, some chat opportunities for people to chat to each other about teaching sociology. And so I went along feeling a bit of a fraud, but actually I was able to share my understanding and topics that maybe some of the sociologists felt less confident in because of my geographical background, because of my understanding of different cultures around the world, and having experienced quite closely some of those cultures. So I think having that geographical background can really be beneficial in sociology as well.
Because in relation to that, one of the questions I've talked a lot about with many people who've been guests on the show actually is about how often sociology is criticised for being American-centric or certainly Eurocentric. And you probably agree with that, don't you, that we actually need to start to learn sociology in a much more global sense rather than just hearing from the obvious, if you like.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's just wonderful when you get the opportunity to do more of that. And I think it's interesting because I've been learning a lot from listening to people talk about decolonizing geography and the idea of not just, teaching about different places and tackling the issues of countries that have been colonized and the impact it had, but trying to decolonize our thought. So learning about, different belief systems and different social systems from around the world, and not always thinking that you've got to default to a Western system. And it would be fantastic if the sociology specifications drew into that area more. Fantastic to be able to look. I've done lots of research and some writing recently for the Geographical Association on China, and I spent some time researching the impact of Confucianism on, did I pronounce that right? On, the way that people are in China and the culture and the idea of the belief in the importance of the community. And I just think that's so interesting to look at in comparison to individualism. And there's so much to bring in about when you've got people reacting in certain ways. A resource that I've produced looks at the background to China and the Confucianism, but also things like the impact of the British Empire coming in and the Opium Wars, how that affected the confidence of people in China in their identity. And then, of course, we had the migrants to places like the USA facing the racism and being considered to be the yellow peril and being treated in a way which was much more negative than migrants from other countries. And I think when you start to bring together all of these threads, you can start to see a lot more about why China reacts to the world in the way it does today. So it's just absolutely fascinating to take this much greater perspective on sociology.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for the Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I found that students have been really, really interested in research and studies which are not European or American, actually.
Absolutely.
We were looking at something to do with the popularity of hip hop and skateboarding in Japan and so on. And they were fascinated with, anything to do with Japanese culture and so on. So the more we can broaden it out, I think most people would be all for it.
Yeah, there's a really interesting video that I use with my sociologists when we're looking at different cultures, and it's the Na people in China, which it's one of the last remaining matriarchies, and so that's really interesting to look at. But in the video, it also discusses how basically the community has become a tourist attraction because people want to go and see this different way of doing things, which is destroying the cultural difference that people were coming to see. And so that's fascinating to look at how you've got somewhere which has developed a culture that is so different, but how that culture is now in great danger because of becoming so much of a let's go see this.
Yeah, do you know what comes to mind? I lived in Kenya and I had some friends who came over. I took them on the Masai Mara trip. We went on safari, and the Masai come over and talk to you, and they do some pictures, and they asked us, "Is that an iPhone 4 or an iPhone 5?" And we were just absolutely bemused by that. they could understand. They were even asking us what type of smartphone we had. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
I go to Uganda. Well, I've been several times, haven't been able to go recently, dying to go back. But all my teacher friends in Uganda are absolutely crazy about their mobile phones because, of course, they didn't have landlines. They've gone straight from having nothing to having mobile phones. And the mobile phone culture is massive. And and children that I'm teaching in schools are thinking, there's awful stereotypes, aren't there, of, the African people living in mud huts. It's
exactly.
no.
Exactly. Yeah. Is it Ginger, the area in Uganda? I love that area.
Yeah, Ginger is the area that claims to be the source of the Nile. I've been to Ginger. Very, very beautiful.
Yeah, fantastic place. Do you also, in geography, do you teach any of the sociological theory as such? Does that come into it?
Not really. In geography, we don't really teach a lot of theory. I teach mainly physical geography now at A level, but there's not really a lot of theory stuff that's taught as in particular studies in geography. It's quite different from sociology. But it's still, like sociology is all about the concepts, and then you back it up with the studies. You've got the concepts in geography, but you tend to support them more with like real world examples. So it's a little bit different.
And just to go back to something you said about decolonisation of the geography specification, obviously that's been talked about for sociology as well. And we just mentioned about trying to make sociology more global. If it were up to you, Catherine, which direction would you take sociology A level in? What do you think needs to adapt, change, improve?
Oh my goodness. The thing is, though, that's a really scary thing to ask me, because I do get terrible imposter syndrome talking about sociology, because I am really a geography teacher. But like I say, I've really got, you get pulled in by it, don't you, sociology. Yeah. You just can't stop looking into things. And particularly, like I say, because of the master's degrees I've done in education, I think that's really fascinating. But one of the things that I worry about is that a lot of the studies that I seem to come across in textbooks and different resources about sociology, a lot of the time it just seems to be very dated. And I know there are key studies that are important to look at, but I was born in 1972, and so I turned 50 very soon. And quite often I'm looking at studies in sociology that are being written about the time when I was a small child. And so I think that it's just so important with sociology to keep things really up to date. And I'm not sure that the exam specifications really push that enough. Like I say, I teach the OCR specification, which is great in many ways. But when you look at things like the suggested reading list, a lot of things are maybe from the 1990s, maybe just getting into the 2000s. And when I think about how much change has happened in society over that time, then I really think we need to be pulling things more up to date. I think that we've got issues with particularly technology having changed so rapidly. The pandemic has changed things, and that's going to need to be taken into account. But I also worry about some of the almost like stereotypes being reinforced because they haven't been maybe updated. So one area that frustrates me a lot is when I'm talking about sexuality and studies and different bits in different books where they talk about maybe gay people being maybe more promiscuous. And it just makes me think, but a lot of studies must have been taking place when it was much less acceptable to be a queer person in society. And so maybe people weren't so able to feel that they could be open about having those long-term loving relationships. And I just think today, I think the world has probably moved on a great deal. And so particularly when I'm teaching things about ethnicity, about sexuality, I am crying out for really good sources of information, of really up-to-date examples of work. I think that's what I'd love to see, is more emphasis on let's really bring things up to date.
I totally agree. It's quite scary, actually, isn't it, when you go, this study's from 2002, not that long ago. Actually, that's 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm teaching 16-year-olds. So to them, 2002 is, just woe away. And so, I just think that that's something, because I'm from a geography background, I have much more of an idea of where to go and seek up-to-date geography information than I do sociological information. And I worry that a lot of the textbooks are still talking about things that happened a long, long time ago. And I don't want my students walking out of my lessons with ideas in their head that are out of date.
Yeah, I've found that actually talking about, teaching about gender, so, sort of some of the stereotypes that are referred to in some of the studies there, and the students kind of shake their head and disagree. No, that's not right. So, well, it probably was right at the time of writing, but not now.
Yes. Yeah. And to be honest, without wanting to be a terrible creep, your podcasts have helped hugely because they are a way to access studies and sociologists talking that are talking about things that are happening now. And I think that has made a massive difference. So I can listen to things as a teacher and I can get a much more up-to-date idea. But also I can get my students to listen to podcasts and hear ideas which are much more at the, at the cutting edge of what's going on in sociology. I also find it useful as well when students come back, because I have quite a lot of students go off to study sociology and related fields at university. And so that is amazing when I have students that come back to see me and I'm like, right, okay, tell me all about it then. Get me up to date. And so that's great. But just generally in the world of sociology, I think there's a lot of people crying out for access to the really up-to-date studies and information and concepts. And also maybe more which is refuting things that were believed previously.
Yeah, I would go with that as well. I think that's absolutely critical. That you have to think about when the study was written, when it was conducted, how it was conducted. So using that sort of critical lens, I think, is of fundamental importance, definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, I still do talk to my students about things like cultural deprivation theory because I think they need to be aware of it so they can challenge it. And obviously, teaching in this type of school I do, a lot of students get very upset about the idea of, working class parents being seen as having the wrong norms and values because my children are pretty much working class children. But I think it's really important to still teach some of those things which I would consider to be out of date, because you might still have things like maybe, dare I say it, new rights thinking, which may sometimes build on some of those foundations.
Yeah.
But also the students need to be able to evaluate those ideas. But they do need to then have the really up-to-date thinking to be able to just consider these different ideas. And obviously, as a teacher, it's not my job to say this is right or this is wrong, but I can present the different information and get my children to think critically about this and come to their own ways of thinking about different ideas. But to do that, I need to have my weaponry of the up-to-date studies that are set in a more relevant context.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Thank you very much for the positive feedback, because that was sort of the idea of the podcast, actually, to get people on which goes against just what the textbook's saying, going beyond the textbook. So, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. Catherine, I did say I would only do half an hour of your time. So I really do appreciate you giving up half an hour of your time to talk us through geography and sociology. Thank you very much for your time today.
Absolute pleasure. And I hope people find it useful.
Thank you very much. And congratulations and good luck for your 50th birthday too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Bye now.
Bye.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for The Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociology show podcast@gmail.com.